The presuppositions behind a debate are often far more telling than the conclusions reached within it. For Christians especially, who confess that all reality is created, sustained, and interpreted by God, we must be careful not only to refute error, but to recognize when a debate has already assumed a false view of the world. This principle became especially clear to me while observing a recent discussion involving YouTuber Andrew Wilson and an anonymous TikTok commentator. The subject at hand was the definition of fascism and whether or not Andrew could be called one. Now, what's remarkable to me about Andrew is that he always approaches debates with honorable intentions and sound logic. And here in this instance, he sought to test the internal consistency of his opponent's claim that fascism consists of nationalism in oppression of minority identity groups. Now, it's also worth noting that this was not a formal, structured debate. It was just a short-form exchange on TikTok where the pace is fast and the format is casual, and precision is often sacrificed for brevity. No one should read too much into the moment nor treat it as representative of Andrew's fuller work, which is usually far more thoughtful and rigorous. However, even in these brief moments, we are given opportunities to reflect on how framing, presupposition, and worldview function beneath the surface of what appears to be a straightforward exchange. And that is the spirit in which my commentary here is offered. I'm not trying to dramatize a passing moment here. I want to draw a valuable lesson from it.
Well, let's start with what you think a fascist is.
Okay.
What is it?
What is a fascist? It's someone who insists on nationalistic policies, will take a small minority group and use them as an outgroup to create a nationalistic impulse. That's generally a fascist.
So FDR?
I would not say FDR.
But I don't understand. He was quite the nationalist, wasn't he?
Well, who did he create a minority outgroup to oppress?
Didn't he oppress black people?
Not in the way that he made them. If we destroy them, we have a successful... a hallmark of fascism in a big way is to create an outgroup that is supposedly a giant threat to your nationalistic impulse, who is actually generally less than 1% of the population. That's happened in every single one.
Well, I don't even think that by that criteria you could even say Trump was a fascist, because who's he oppressing? That's 1% of the population.
The real problem wasn't what was being argued, but how the argument was set up. Andrew's opponent started from the assumption that identity groups and their struggles are the most important way to understand things. And by accepting that from the start, Andrew ended up playing by his opponent's rules. Intersectionality asserts identity categories constitute the very structure of reality. The philosophy behind this thinking is Marxist in origin, and it asserts that identity groups are what reality is made of. In biblical terms, however, this would be a form of idolatry. It would be replacing God's definition of humanity, which is rooted in His image and purpose, with a vision of human identity that is fundamentally fractured. In other words, it assumes the natural state of the world is for us to be adversarial and defined by various temporal grievances. It's an idea that basically denies that God is the creator and we are His creation. It's an ideology that assumes that what people experience and who has power decide what is real and what is true. And so if one accepts intersectionality as ontology, then all further discourse is warped. Now, perhaps if this debate were to have gone on a bit longer and Andrew's opponent had given him the courtesy of good faith, this could have journeyed into the true definition of fascism and why Andrew's opponent was incorrectly defining the word. And to Andrew's credit, he did attempt to do just that.
Well, fascism, which would be represented by the fasci, you could look at, like, perhaps some people who describe it, well, wouldn't just be Gentili, by the way, but essentially what you're looking for is...
authority, man.
You're actually looking for there being...
authority, man. What is fascism authority, man?
I'm trying to tell you. Do you want me to or no?
Get to it then. Come on, land the plane, bro.
Yeah, so anyway, you would be taking the body of the state, and basically you'd be nationalizing the body of the state, and it would be working in unison with the head of the state, which would be represented by the fasci. That's what that means.
You'd also have to reject democracy and individual freedoms. I think you missed that in centralized
Nope, you
power.
could have a democratic fascist state.
No, I don't think those two things make sense.
Well,
right?
whether you think so or not, there's nothing contradictory about the two things.
However, what I noticed here was that Andrew's first instinct was to test internal coherence, and as a debate tactic that is sound. But my question is if such a method ought to have been employed without first challenging the metaphysical foundations on which the opponent's categories rest. Again, perhaps that may have come later, after the definition had been debunked. The thing is, at some point in time, I would want the discussion to yield to the question as to what standard terms are defined. On what basis are identity groups elevated to the level of ontological truth? Now, I want to be absolutely clear. I hold Andrew Wilson in the highest regard. His theological clarity, his pastoral voice, and his willingness to speak to difficult cultural issues has made him an indispensable voice in the public square. What I'm talking about here is far from a critique of his character or capability, but a fraternal encouragement offered in the spirit of mutual sharpening. My concern lies with the framing of the debate, because by entering into an opponent's structure of categories without first calling it into question, we may unintentionally grant legitimacy to an alien metaphysic. That is, by immediately asking about FDR, Andrew appeared to accept the terms of the conversation as if they reflected a neutral or shared understanding of political reality, when in fact they were already loaded with the assumptions of intersectional ideology. So the risk here is not that one is out-reasoned, but that one is mislocated. We find ourselves no longer critiquing error from a logical standpoint, but analyzing inconsistencies within a framework that has already departed from the truth. And it should also be noted that Andrew did later attempt to offer an accurate definition of fascism.
Okay, cool. So tell me what the core features of fascism are.
So you're going to be looking at the body of the state being nationalized. That's going to be the first core. The second
That's
general...
not
Yes,
That's
yes
not
it
the
is.
core.
Yes, it
No,
is.
It's not.
Well,
It's
hold on.
authoritarian.
No, it's not. Listen, authoritarianism, as you would describe it, would describe every government entity on planet Earth. They're all authoritarian.
No.
Then what is
It's a
authoritarian?
centralized-
What is it?
It's a centralized system of power. It's a rejection of democracy.
We don't.
That's
We
where
have a
it's-
centralized system of power in the United States.
No, we don't.
Yes,
No.
we do.
Do you
What's
have
your
a different one? That's
Yes, I would go
my-
off of the tenets of Giovanni Gentile, who was basically the architect of fascism.
Yeah,
What
cool.
does he
So,
go
can you tell me? Can you tell me then where you're getting this definition so I can follow along with you?
Yeah, dude.
Okay.
I'm getting the definition from my brain, from what I
Oh,
know.
okay. So the source is you. You're the
Absolutely.
source. You're the source.
Is me.
You're the source.
Still, by that point, the conversation had already been tainted by his opponent's framing and further devolutions from civil rhetoric by other people on the platform. Ultimately, to challenge the framework is not to refuse conversation. It is to redeem it, so to speak. Generally speaking, an argument shouldn't be built on a foundation of sand when we have the rock of truth, and that means asking questions about ontology. Mankind is not defined by Marxist philosophies, but by his creation in the image of God and his accountability to him. So let us proceed in our debates not as neutral observers, but as servants of the Lord Jesus Christ, who speaks truth into all spheres of life. Let us not grant to the world what belongs to God.